If an aspiring creative came to me asking for my number one piece of advice after 15 years of full-time work, it would have nothing to do with their actual creative profession. It wouldn't be about skills, wouldn't even be about working with clients or time management. It would be simply that you need to create a system to gain inspiration. And that only continues to get more important as you continue to evolve in the different stages of your creative work and business. I'll explain, but first, hey there, I'm Janelle. I have been a freelance graphic designer for over 15 years now, and I have made every possible mistake on my path to being a full-time creative. I want to help you get there a little bit faster and with a little bit less heartache. So, the best thing I can tell anyone to do is to start early, creating a trusted system to gain and save inspiration. No matter what field you're in, no matter what you're working on or what you're interested in, that is the very best thing you can do right from the get-go that will save your butt as you continue to grow. It might not seem like the biggest deal in all of the other things that there are to set up in your life, but trust me, if I could just go back in time and tell myself to start better, I would be so thankful to myself. One of the first things I heard in my first year of design school was a quote by Ira Glass about how the biggest struggle when you're just starting out is that what got you into this is that you have good taste. You love beautiful things and you're frustrated because your own skill level doesn't match up to the taste that you have. But the taste is what saves you. That's what moves you forward and gives you the inspiration that you need to be able to keep matching your skill set and getting closer and closer with your skill and talent to your taste level. I'm super paraphrasing, but you get the idea. That's why when you're just starting out, the very best thing you can do is to see a lot of good stuff, to look, to go to museums, to read books, to spend hours on Pinterest, to fill your mind with cool inspiration and interesting things that people are doing and gather a lot of things to ping off of so that you have more things that you can be inspired by and up that taste level and have more things to work off of. But if you don't have a system to be saving those things, then you can browse all day on Pinterest, but it's not actually useful when 2 weeks later you sit down to work on a project and you need something to go off of. You've kind of wasted all of that great inspiration gathering. As any kind of artist or creative, we get a little bit obsessed with the idea of finding our voice, right? And it takes so much longer to find your style, to see what you really like, and to craft your voice as a designer or creative of any kind if you haven't been storing your influences and seeing over time what it is you're drawn to. One of my favorite creatives working today is this guy named Andy J. Pizza. He's an incredible illustrator, and he's also an incredible teacher. He has a fantastic podcast called Creative Peptalk that I can't recommend more. But he also has some excellent Skillshare classes. My favorite one is all about finding your style, and it's required watching as far as I'm concerned for anyone who wants to become any kind of artistic or creative person. In that, he talks about how the best thing you can do is to start looking at the patterns and the elements and the assets that you're continually drawn to and basically create what he calls you on a plate. Here are the references and the influences and the artists and the things that I come back to over and over again. If you have a system that you can start building those things and really easily saving them every time you find them, then it actually becomes useful and it's faster to put together you on a plate to say, okay, looking over this for the past year, here I've noticed that these are the things that I'm drawn to every time I sit down to make something. I love these colors. I really love it when you have this kind of graphic pattern, or this inspiration of a time period really hits me over and over again. This motif is something I come back to, no matter it's for clients or for myself. That's really valuable information, and you can skip literally years in the process of artistic self-discovery if, without needing to think about it, you just save those things as you find them. Then you can kind of go backwards and assemble the map and look at all those things on the page. But if you haven't done the work to save those things, then you can't become the detective with his murder board, pinging up all of the inspiration points and making the string lines, figuring out all of the things that connect the pieces of your artistic puzzle, right? So that's the first reason that you need to have some way to put this stuff down. The second reason is because The longer you go in the process of becoming a full-time creative person, systematizing your processes, an incredibly unsexy term for one of my favorite things in the world, is really a huge part of turning pro. In anything you're doing, whatever the field, the more you can create a system to save the things that you use a lot, the faster you'll be. Simple as. No matter what you're working on, there are probably things that you pull from over and over again, right? Maybe you're a photographer and you need stock imagery a lot, or you use LUTs that you want to copy and paste on new imagery, or you're an editor and you use a lot of CSS code snippets or shortcut keys for editing software. And if you have a library of those things that you can add to every time you find something cool, it saves you a heck of a lot of time trying to remember how to use that particular function. In the design space, it's graphic assets and it's photography that you're going to use for mood boards. All of those things, whatever the area is, are things that you're running into a lot, right? And the more that you create a system right from the get-go, where every time you see something cool, maybe it's just a quote or a book recommendation or whatever the inspiration is, the more you remove the friction between finding a cool thing and actually saving it so that 3 years down the line, when you're ready to work on a project that's relevant to that, you can pull it up again, the more of a professional you will be, the faster you're able to work, and just the more efficient you are. The easiest example of this is obviously Pinterest, right? Obviously, anyone in the creative space probably has at least one Pinterest board that they've saved inspiration to when they find something cool. But what if you took it a step further? What if you actually used Pinterest to make a sort of filing system for yourself that was incredibly specific and was exactly what you were looking for a certain kind of job or for a certain kind of activity? So that instead of just, here's images I like, you have really detailed buckets and buckets within buckets in Pinterest where you're actually articulating this is the exact thing that you want to use it for. Then it becomes actually useful and not just like a pretty thing that you scroll and then you have 600 things on a board and you never go back to it again, for example. I make a ton of mood boards for clients. It's one of my very favorite parts of the design process and probably one of the things I geek out about the most. I make them just for fun because I love making mood boards. And for years, I would do the same thing. When I was ready to start a new project, I would get onto Pinterest, have my little cup of coffee, I'd open up a brand new shiny board, and I would spend hours, way too long when you actually think about it, scrolling through looking for gobs of inspiration for this new project, right? Way more than I was ever going to actually use for the mood board. And it took me way more time because I like looking at pretty things and it was inspiring and I could kind of justify browsing around for too long because it was technically part of the client process, right? Finally, after years of this and starting the process over again every time I had a new project, I realized I was pulling a lot of the same kinds of images every time, or I was at least looking for the same types of images because it's important when you're making a mood board for a branding project that you show color and type and imagery and certain types of things. So I was finding the same searches over and over again. And then it finally dawned on me. If I made one Pinterest board, but I made different sections within it for the different types of images that I like in mood boards, then every time I find something in a particular color or of a particular type or for packaging or different types of things, then when I sit down and I know, okay, I'm looking for a mood board that has a lot of blue in it and I need black and white imagery and I need this kind of a graphic pattern, I can go straight to my one space that is super well organized and has thousands of images in it at this point, and I've saved so much time. And then when I'm just hanging out and need a little serotonin boost and I scroll on Pinterest, if I find something and I happen to stumble on something that I think would be good in a mood board down the line, I don't have to think about it at all. I know exactly where it goes. My fingers do the work. I copy, save, boom, boom. I've just added to my creative arsenal in the future. Thanks, past me. You were a real pal. It totally changes how you think about your off time even, because even when you're not thinking about it, you're continuing to gather things that will be useful to you in the future, and you get to be a rock star. It doesn't have to be just Pinterest though, although that's obviously the good starting point. The other place that I save most inspiration in all areas of my life is where I save most everything in my life, and that is my true love, Notion. I'm obviously not the only person on the internet in love with using Notion to save things in their life. But if you think about it as a filing cabinet for all of your inspiration points and resources and good recommendations, you can really create all kinds of libraries and databases and reference libraries for yourself that you can use moving forward. And that's exactly what I've done. In my business section of my Notion database, which is a whole thing I can do other videos about, I've created reference libraries for myself so that every time that I find something interesting in a certain space, I know exactly where to drop it and I can come back to it later. I've made swipe files of every time that I find a website with good copy, or I want to take a screenshot of a landing page that I want to reference sometimes. I think that's really useful. I've made libraries of code snippets of CSS snippets that I can use when I'm coding a website, or as I'm editing videos that I have references for myself. I've made Spark files for myself. Every time I'm out somewhere and I see a really cool like store display that I just think is really inspiring and a neat use of materials, I add that to the inspiration bucket. When I'm at an art museum and I see an art piece that I just really love or really moves me, I jot it down so that I can reference the artist later as an inspiration source or a part of my kind of artistic family tree, as Andy J. Pizza would call it. I think any way that you can create a system for yourself that you can go back to later, once you have that thing made, it makes the friction between seeing the thing and grabbing it so much easier. Just set it up once and you'll know where to drop something every time you find it. When I was thinking about starting this YouTube channel, one of the first things I did was make a database for myself so that I could drop in YouTube thumbnails every time I saw something that was cool, or when someone did something neat with a graphic on screen that I want to use as inspiration. So you can start gathering things as you're working on new projects so that it saves you time when you need to reference something or show it to an editor. You have those examples of the things that you're inspired by. Whatever the thing and however you do it, if you start saving those things from the start, 5 years later, you will be a badass with this incredibly dense, usable library of materials that you can use moving forward. So that's why I say this is my #1 piece of advice. No matter what you're going to do with it, save the things you love. If this speaks to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let me know what you think. And if you want to see more about how I use this stuff, especially how I use Notion to create all kinds of things in my creative space, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and I would love to nerd out about it with you. See you next time.